In this chapter, we're going to create 3D objects, and to do that, we're going to use the Create New 3D Object panel. The first item on that panel is a 3D postcard, so I'm going to show you how to make postcards in this lesson. To do that, let's go to Working Files, open up the Photoshop projects, and open up postcard.psd. What we've got here is a place setting. We're going to make a postcard out of that and tilt it away from the viewer to give it some perspective. Then we're going to put a wine bottle on top of it, right on top of the table. Then we're going to take this tropical beach photo and turn it into a postcard and lean it up against the wine bottle. So to get started, we want to turn this into a postcard. It's very simple. Make sure the layer is active. Open up the 3D panel here. Have 3D postcard selected and click Create. And apparently nothing happens, but you do see a ground plane here, so that means you are now in 3D space. This is a 2D object in 3D space. Now, when you create a new 3D object by using that panel, every object you create, except for a postcard, has a light automatically added to that layer. But postcards don't. That's because if you add a light to a postcard, it almost always blows it out and makes it too bright. But that doesn't mean it's not being illuminated. It is. It's being illuminated by an image-based light. Let me show you what I mean. So I go over here and click on Environment, and you see that IBL is checked, image-based light. And the light is white, and the intensity is 100%. That's the default setting. It makes it look like the original image, like nothing has changed. But in fact, it's being illuminated by this image-based light. I can change the intensity like this. But we're going to go back to the default here by doing Control or Command Z. There we go. So just so you know, there is lighting here, and the lighting comes from what's called image-based light. It's just a light that goes around everything and illuminates everything evenly. All right, so now I want to tilt this object away from the viewer. So I have the Rotate tool selected here. Just going to make sure it's active, like that. And if I hover over it now, I'm going to be moving it rather than rotating it. But as long as it's active, I can go below it now. Now I can rotate it like so. See that it's very thin. It's a 2D object. It has no depth. Notice that the cage around it, though, is thick. That's just to help us control it. Right now I'm using the Rotate tool, though. And it will be a little bit askew here on purpose. I want to fix that by using some numeric values. But now I've tilted it back to right about there. I think it'll work. I want to take care of this thing. I want that to be parallel with the bottom. So I'm going to go to the numeric values here by clicking on the coordinates and changing that Y angle to 0. You just highlight that, press 0, press Enter. That straightens it out. Now I can take this move on Y-axis side of the box here, or the side of the cage, and pull it toward me a bit. So now we've got our place setting tilted away from the viewer. I want to put a wine bottle right on top of it. So turn on the wine bottle here. That's what it looks like. It's our friendly wine bottle we've seen several times now. I'm going to click on the layer to make it active. And now I want to adjust its ground plane so it matches the perspective of the table. Now we're going to do this a couple of times through the exercise here, so this won't be the only time we do it, but you get a sense of how it works and get it more or less set up pretty well here. I want to take the Rotate tool again and move the ground plane. So I go down here to select the ground plane. Right now the bottle is selected, so I click down here to click on the current view. And now I can rotate it a bit, pull it back like so. I'm going to watch these lines here and see how they line up with the edge of the table there, and also down here in the bottom. So there we go, try to hold that back a little bit. Line them up, and actually that's pretty good right there, I think. Now I want to position the wine bottle and make it smaller. I could take the ground plane and move it back there like that, but that'll kind of mess up the perspective. So I'm just going to move the wine bottle. So I'm going to click on it to make it active like that. And go get the drag tool. So I press V a couple of times to make the drag tool active up here. Just going to push it back a little ways like so. And I want to scale it down a bit too. So I'm going to hover over the scale uniformly thing and pull that back a little bit. When I do this though, it lifts it up above the ground plane. One of the little anomalies of scale is that it scales at the widget, not at the bottom. You can see we're above the ground plane by looking at the secondary view here. Going off to the side, for example, you see we're floating way above the ground plane there. Now I can drag it down to the ground plane, but there's an automatic way to do this. As long as it's active, I go to 3D and click on Snap Object to Ground Plane. Down it goes. So you can see we didn't quite get it back as far as we wanted to. So I'm going to take the drag tool again here and move it back some more. So I click out here and drag it back. That kind of works, I think. There we go. All right, now I want to put a postcard in front of it, lean a postcard up against it like that. So I got this image of this tropical beach here. There we go. I'm going to convert that into a postcard so it's active here. Got the 3D panel out here. Click on the 3D postcard radio button. Click on Create. Now I've got a postcard. It has its own ground plane. The thing is, I don't want to have two ground planes at work here. I just want to have one. I want to add this one to this layer down here. So I'm going to change the name here so we can keep track of things. Click on that a couple times. Change that to wine bottle. There we go. So we keep track of that. Go back to tropical beach here. With it active, I want to merge it with the one below it. So I'm going to make sure it's active like that, click this panel flyout menu, and choose Merge Down. What happens is that it puts those two 3D objects into one layer, and names that layer based on the thing that was at the bottom of that pile. So it's wine bottle, even though it's actually wine bottle and postcard. So I want to change that tropical beach layer there and move it around a little bit so it fits onto the table appropriately. So I click on it to make it active like that. We've got it active over here. I want to shrink it down a bit, so I'm going to just scale it uniformly by pulling it back like so. There we go. Make it a little more realistic in terms of its size. I want to try to lean it up against the bottle back there. So I'm just going to take the rotate tool like this, move it around a little bit like so. Maybe take the roll tool a bit like this. And I'm going to take the drag tool and kind of just drag it over there. There you go. Might be able to scale it down a little bit more, maybe just a little bit smaller. Okay, now I want to try to lean it against the bottle. Kind of tricky to do that. I'm going to change my view over here. Let's go change the view to the left side. You can see it's leaning against there a little bit. I'm going to move the ground plane around now and goof up my perspective, but I want to see how it's leaning up against here a little bit better. So I'm going to take the current view here. And these guys will now act in concert as I move this thing around. So I'll take the rotate tool like that and kind of twist it around. I can see a little bit better where the postcards are lining up. So I'll click on the postcard here and slide a little bit to the left like so. Push it back a little bit and it'll cut into the bottle at some point, like right there. Now I can see both of these guys are hovering above the ground plane. So I'm going to try to fix that by clicking on this one here and going 3D. Snap to the ground plane. Down it goes. Click on the wine bottle, same thing. 3D. Snap it to the ground plane. And now we'll rotate the ground plane back again. So I'll click on the ground plane here, make it active. Rotate it around like that. Get the perspective back where I want it. Like so, more or less. Maybe pull it back a little bit. I can move this around a little bit more, but I think it looks pretty good leaning against the bottle there. The thing is, the drop shadow isn't working right. See, the drop shadow goes off like that, and the drop shadow on the plate goes off like this. We can fix that by moving the light around. I'm going to talk about lighting in other lessons, but we'll just do a quick fix here by clicking on the light like that and making it active. Here's the controller. Move it around, and that will move the shadow. Also, we're now going to see a shadow of the postcard, which is nice. Also notice that the shadow of the postcard and the bottle are pretty sharp relative to this shadow down below, which is not anywhere near as sharp, kind of a soft shadow. We can fix that by clicking on the lights, going over here to properties, and making the shadow have some softness, like so. It's going to make it look kind of noisy at this point. We can do a little bit of a render here, and we'll do a brief render, and it'll fix that to a certain degree. It won't make it perfect at one pass like that. It'll get better after it does a few more passes, but this gives you this preliminary view, at least give you a sense of how this is working. So I'll stop it now. So there you go. That's how you make 3D postcards and position them in 3D space.